Hello, everyone, and welcome back into this week's episode of the Everyday Strength Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Hagley. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the three pillars of the conjugate method, and that is the repetition method, right? You might have heard of max effort work. That's that heavy strain building, strength building work. And then we've also potentially heard of the dynamic effort method, where we're moving weight extremely fast through the full range of motion. But the repetition method is one that doesn't get nearly as much attention as those other two, right? First off, it's just not as flashy, okay? No one really posts their accessory work on social media, but we want to post when we've got six plates on each side of the bar. We want to post our fast and explosive movements, but the repetition method, again, just doesn't get the attention as the other two, but it is an essential component of conjugate training, and it lays that foundation for your long-term development. So the repetition method isn't fluff work. It's not junk volume. It's not chasing the pump. There is actually a strategic reason behind it, and there's also some evidence to really support how it can improve your performance, how it can improve your physique, and how it can improve the other lifts that follow along with it, right? And it does play a really big role. It's probably not talked about enough, but in protecting your joints and protecting the connective tissues and just overall supporting your performance. So let's get into what is the repetition method, right? The repetition method, it's a fairly straightforward process. We're taking submaximal weights, usually somewhere in that 30% to 70% of your 1 rep max, and we're performing them for higher number of reps and in closer proximity to failure. Okay, the focus is not on lifting the heaviest load possible, but more so about accumulating volume, accumulating quality tension, and fatiguing the muscle itself. This was obviously popularized by Louis Simmons, through the West Side Barbell. He writes about it extensively in a number of his different publications, especially like the West Side Barbell Book of Methods. But it extends beyond powerlifting. If we backtrack a little bit, this is commonly used in hypertrophy programs where you're lifting 3 sets of 10, right? We're getting close to failure, 3 sets of 12, 3 sets of 8, whatever it may be, commonly used by bodybuilders to just build muscle, right? But those programs tend to lack the other two methods. They don't develop strength through the maximal strength, the maximal effort method. They don't develop the power through the dynamic effort method. And so as an everyday athlete, we can combine all three of these, but not to the same extent as a powerlifter would who's following conjugate through the West Side program. And I think that it's important, for us to be able to include this in our work because it does set the foundation for us to lift heavier, to condition better, and just overall be more athletic, be more muscular kind of throughout our everyday lives, okay? I do want to emphasize that, and it's important to understand this isn't burnout work. It's not a finisher, okay? Whenever we talk about the repetition method, we're talking about doing quality repetitions, but through from a physiological standpoint that I'll talk about here in a second. And ultimately, it helps to develop that muscle tissue, and it helps to build that resilience in the joints and in the tissue itself to further support the rest of your training and the rest of your programming. So now, why does this matter, right? Why does this matter for us as the everyday athlete? Why does it matter for my performance? And from a physiological standpoint, the biggest one is, it's hypertrophy and its muscle growth effects, okay? Hypertrophy is primarily driven by 3 things, and those are mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and then to a smaller degree, muscle damage, right? So to start, kind of go through each of these and just kind of show how the repetition method fits into that, right? So mechanical tension, this is that big one. And this is where, the forces that are placed on the muscle fibers to a great extent. And when you take a set close to failure, those last few reps of that set create just as much tension as if you were doing, say, a heavy set of 5, right? So if we're doing 15 reps and we're getting really, really close to failure, we're creating a lot of mechanical tension in that muscle, just as if we were only doing 5 reps, okay? Second one is metabolic stress. And this is, a lot of people will call this the pump. This is that burn that you feel, that cellular swelling. and the buildup of different metabolites. And what this does, this actually does contribute to the growth. It, basically sends off these mechanical signals, these different types of signals to the muscle machinery to say, hey, we need to grow. We need to put more, muscle on on the body here. We need to grow bigger to be able to handle this stress again the next time that we, face that type of stress. And the last one is muscle damage. And this one is more of a byproduct than a goal. But with high repetition training, the kind of the excessive eccentric forces, the eccentric stress that's placed on the muscle can contribute to hypertrophy from that. So the literature, again, strongly supports these three kind of drivers of hypertrophy across a number of different studies, across meta-analyses, across review articles, folks like Brad Schoenfeld, Stu Phillips, many others that hypertrophy can happen across a wide range of loads. So anywhere from 30% all the way up to 85% of your 1 rep max. And it can do so long as those sets are taken close to failure, right? So both heavy sets of 5s and lighter sets of 20 can drive muscle growth so long as the effort and the intent is there and we're getting close to, muscle failure itself. The other thing is that hypertrophy has been shown to occur on a wide spectrum of rep ranges. So it can occur anywhere from 6 to 8 reps all the way up to 25 or more. So that's where that spectrum lives, and it can happen widely across that area. So it's not just 12 to 15, but from anywhere from almost as low as 6 up to 25 and then even beyond in some studies. And so for athletes, this translates to a number of different benefits that we can experience from this, right? And the first one is strengthening the weak links, okay? Things like the hamstrings, the shoulders, the upper back, the low back, the trunk, okay? If we are able to locate and identify the weak links in our performance, then we can now train them through the repetition method using things like RDLs, hamstring curls, reverse hypers, back extensions, high repetition shoulder work. We can train the trunk from an anti-rotation standpoint or a rotation standpoint, anti-stability, whatever it may be. And that allows us to then improve the main lifts, to improve our performance if we're playing a sport, right? We can allow the repetition method to drive performance in those other areas. The second benefit is increasing muscle size. And this, one, you just look bigger, right? We've got more muscle on our body, right? We're fitting, our shirts are a little bit tighter, sleeves are fitting a little bit tighter. But that also drives potential for your ability to build strength. So the more muscle mass that we have, the stronger we can become, right? The more muscle that we have, the more powerful and explosive we can be, okay? So most people don't have to worry about building too much muscle. If we're natural, right, we're going to build muscle to a certain extent, and then we'll be fine from then on out. But the more muscle that we have, the better our outcomes are going to be for strength, for power, and then ultimately our athletic performance. Third one is reinforcing the joints and the tendons and the connective tissue that's there, and that helps us to reduce injury risk. And then the last one is just overall building work capacity, right? We're doing a lot of work and potentially in a very short amount of time. Okay, so I've used the repetition method in some warm-ups in the past where we would do, say, 3 different exercises that were very specific to the goal for that day, so the main lift. So if we were going to squat, then we were choosing 3 different types of, leg or trunk movements. If we were going to bench press, we were doing something with the upper back, the chest itself, and the triceps, the main movers, the main lifters of that movement. And we would do 4 sets of anywhere from like 20 to 25 repetitions. And we're going through the movement at a nice gradual pace, right? We're not doing tempo work here. We're not flying through the movement like dynamic effort, but we're basically going through it 4 sets, 25 reps each set. That's 100 total reps for 3 different movements before we've ever touched the main lift. So with that, you're getting winded, you're getting sweaty, you're getting out of breath. And so there's a little bit of a conditioning component to doing this, that work capacity, the ability for your muscles to just kind of repeatedly move over and over and over again is going to be increased by using the repetition method itself. All right, so now how do we actually use and implement the repetition method in our training, in our programming? And the best spot is is truly in that accessory work, right? So after we've done the main lift for the day, this is the work that's now going to support the main movements. Okay. So we know what our weak links are, and we're going to target those through the accessories. Okay. If we are an athlete that's performing some type of event, so like for myself right now, I'm training for a high rocks event where I'm doing a lot of running. I know that my knees and the lower leg itself just needs more work. And so I'm picking the accessory movements that are going to help to build the tibialis, the knee joint itself, to allow me to ideally stay injury free, but then also just to be able to then perform better whenever it comes to running, and the like. So basically target what we need to build from a main movement perspective or from an outcome perspective, and let's build around that. Some different guidelines that I like to use whenever I'm programming this are, ideally we're picking somewhere between 2 to 4 accessories after those main lifts, and we're using rep ranges somewhere in the 8 to 20 rep range. For smaller muscle groups, so like for the arms, for example, for the shoulder complex itself, I like to use 25 reps, but somewhere between that 8 to 20 to 25 repetitions is ideal. In terms of sets, we'll go anywhere from 3 to 5 sets, ideally. That's usually how I tend to program these out, and we might progress it. So we'll start, at the beginning of the program, we might do only 3 sets, and then as we progress through the program, we might ramp it up to 5 sets as we develop that work capacity and just require the need for more volume and more tonnage over time. In terms of RPE, we want to get close to failure, so we're going to try to train to an RPE of around 8 to 9, meaning we have 1 or 2 good, solid quality reps left in the tank. And then from there, we're going to rotate movements every 3 to 4 weeks to allow us to continue to progress and just avoid stagnation at the end of the day. Now, some different examples of the types of movements that I would select for the repetition method. For lower body, things that are single leg, big drivers here, right? Bulgarian split squats, rear leg elevated split squats, step ups, single leg RDLs. We'll do some hamstring curls. We'll do GHD hamstring curls. Okay. Things that are more single joint versus the multi-joint main lifts. And the things that we can allow us to go through that repetition fairly quickly at a fairly good pace. But then also allow us to perform that without fatigue and failure diminishing the quality of the repetition itself. Even like things like leg extension and leg curls on a machine work great here. From an upper body perspective, now we're looking at things like dumbbell presses. So this might be a dumbbell bench press, it might be an incline press, it might be overhead press, okay? Rows, different types of cable rows, barbell rows, dumbbell, kettlebell rows, bandage shoulder work, high rep dumbbell shoulder work, pull-ups even, lat pull-downs, okay? Think of things that we can go through, adjust the load appropriately, and be able to get 8 to 20 repetitions of, okay? And then even for the trunk, here we're looking at things like weighted carries, obviously a little bit different from the repetition method that I just kind of laid out, but weighted carries, back extensions, reverse hyperextensions, anti-rotation holds, things that allow us to just accumulate time, okay? With reverse hyperextensions, I might do sets of 15, or I may set a timer and go for 45 seconds, and I'm just going to do that movement until my timer is up. Same thing with carries, right? If we know that we're going to walk for 200 meters or 100 meters or whatever it may be, that's that repetition method. We're still getting that stress that is needed to grow muscle and to help strengthen those weak links. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the key is to remember that this type of work works to support your max effort movements and your dynamic effort movements. It's not there to replace the main lifts, but more so to develop the muscles, the tissues that allow you to then perform the main lifts better, or to just perform your sport better if you're an athlete. So some takeaways from this, to put it simply, like if you want to apply this to your own programming, here's how you can basically do so effectively. And there's basically 3 rules that we need to follow. The first is just train close to failure, right? Make sure your technique stays solid, but try to get close to failure within 1 to 2 repetitions, if not true failure. The other one is rotate your exercises frequently, every 3 to 4 weeks, as I mentioned, just to keep that stimulus fresh, right? And the last one is make sure we're focusing on the weak links, the weak points in your chain, right? If there's something that you are noticing through your bench press or through your squat or through your deadlift, like say the low back or say the hamstrings, then let's focus our repetition method exercises on those weak links themselves. We can do the arms, but it shouldn't just be about what's looking good in the mirror or what you think you need, but what you actually end up needing to be able to succeed through those. So to round this all out, we'll kind of summarize a little bit, but like a plug and play template, this is something that you can basically put into your next session, okay? Is pick 2 to 3 accessory lifts. You can superset them if you want. You can just go straight sets. Pick 2 to 3 accessory lifts and perform 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 20 reps. Get them close to failure. Between sets, we haven't talked about this yet, but between sets, we're going to rest somewhere between 60 seconds and 90 seconds and then go again. And make sure that you're tracking your performance. So see what's actually working. Aim for progression week to week, not just in the accessories themselves, but in your main lifts. Are the main lifts going up? Are they going down? Are we getting too much volume now and we're getting nagging injuries, right? Track your progress, track how you feel, and be able to adjust off of that. So thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Everyday Strength Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to share it with a friend and like and subscribe. I will look forward to seeing you all next week. Until then, train smart and stay strong.